In this video, I'm going to explain the differences between absolute and relative cell references when working with this spreadsheet where I'm trying to calculate or trying to create one function to calculate the mortgage payments for all of these different mortgage amounts and year amounts. So first I'm going to explain that I've got information already within this spreadsheet. So I've got $1,750 just typed in as my maximum affordable monthly payment. I've got 5.75% as my annual interest rate, and that is formatted with the percentage format. And then I've got my interest payments per year of 12, because I make 12 payments per year. I've got 15 to 35 years as my different year values for my mortgage, and then I've got also $250,000 to $350,000 as my mortgage amounts. So first, I'm just going to create one function, and I'm going to copy that down to all of my other cells within this table. But to do so, I need to be careful about where I use absolute and relative cell references. So first, in D10, I'm going to enter my payment function. And instead of just typing it in manually, I'm going to let Excel do a little bit of the work for me. I'm going to go up to Formulas, go to my Financial category, and scroll down until I find the PMT payment function, and I get my dialog box that pops up and helps me really figure out what I'm doing here. And I want to be careful that I'm including something in all of the bolded fields. These are called arguments. If they're bold, that means they're required for the function to work. If they're not bold, that means they're optional. I don't have to include them, but they're going to help me have better control over my data if I need to do that. I'm not going to in this situation, but that's what those are for. So first, I need to type in the rate. So I've got 5.75%, but I need to be careful that that's really what I want to type in here. And since I'm in the rate argument here, I get this information at the bottom that kind of gives me more information about what that means. So it says rate is the interest rate per period for the loan. For example, use 6% divided by 4 for quarterly payments at 6% APR. So I'm not just going to put in 5.75%, that's my total interest for the year, but I need to actually, in this rate argument here, put exactly how much or what my interest rate is per period, and I've got 12 payments per year or 12 periods per year. So I'm actually going to be putting in 5.75 divided by 12 to get my rate per period, because I'm only calculating the payment for 1 month out of the year, not the whole year as a total. If I was doing that, then I wouldn't have to put this divided by 12 thing. So in order to enter information here, I'm not just going to type in 5.75 divided by 12. I can do that, and that'll get me the information I need, but when I copy this formula down when I'm done, down and over, or across and over and down, it's going to just copy the exact same thing. I don't want that. I want it to update with the number of years that my loan is for. I want it to update with a different amount that my mortgage is for. So in order to do that, instead of 5.75, I'm just going to click in the cell where that value is located. Now I'm going to put divided by, that backslash key, divided by 12. And I could type in 12 here, but again, just to make a better function that copies better, I'm going to click on E6 because that's where the function location is. My number of periods I'm going to go to next. So number of periods is the total number of payments for the loan. It's not going to be 12 payments, that's how many there are per year. It's not going to be 15 years or just 15, that's the number of years, but I actually need to put in 15 years times 12 payments a year. So I'm going to again click on D9 and then type in my multiplication symbol, the asterisk, and Shift 8, and then click on the cell where my number of payments is located, and that's in E6. My PV argument, PV is the present value, the total amount that a series of future payments is worth now. When we're working with a loan function, that's just the current amount of the loan right now. So currently I'm working in this cell right here. It's a 15-year mortgage at $250,000. So I'm just going to click on the cell that contains $250,000. Now here's where we get, and actually at the bottom it calculates what my mortgage will be right now in that in this cell that I'm working in. So that's kind of a nice feature. So here's where we need to really be careful about our absolute and relative cell references. So for E5 and E6, I know that I want those to be absolute because those are never going to change. So no matter how much my mortgage is, or how many years I have that mortgage for, it's always going to be the same interest rate. So since that's never going to change, I'm going to make both of those cell references absolute. And I do that just by inserting dollar signs before the column and before the row of each cell reference. In my number of periods, I've got D9, so the number of years, times E6, which is the number of payments per year. And my number of payments per year is also never going to change. It's always going to be 12 payments per year. So for that specific reference, I can also make that absolute. Put my dollar signs before the column and the row. Now for my D9, let's look at what that references. D9 is referencing 15 years. So that is going to change. When I copy this function across, I want it to always relate to, so I'm going to copy it from D10 over to E10. And when I do that, when I'm in this reference right here, or in this cell, I want it to be related to 20 years, not 15 years. So what I'm going to do, my column is actually going to be changing. When I copy this over, I want my column to change. My row is not going to change. All of these values here are in row 9, but they're in different columns. So I want my row to stay the same, but not my column. So I'm only going to use a mixed reference and put that dollar sign in front of my row, which is 9, but not in front of my column, which is D. That way when I copy this over, it's going to adjust. If it's in this cell, it's going to know I'm talking about 20 years. If I'm here, it's going to talk about 25 years, and so on and so forth. Okay, so last argument for this function is my actual mortgage amount. So when I copy this over, we already know that it's going to update with my number of years. When I copy this down, though, I want it to also update with my mortgage amount. So here, my row is going to change. Every time I go copy this down, I want it to refer to the mortgage amount that's on the row that I'm working in at the moment. However, my column is never going to change. So I'm actually going to use a mixed reference and make the column C absolute. That's not going to change, but when I copy this down, this function, my row is going to change to reflect which row I'm working with right now. So once I'm done here, I still have the same mortgage payment, and that's fine because that's just telling me what's going to be displayed here in cell D10 that I'm working with, a 15-year mortgage for $250,000. So I'm going to click OK. So one thing to remember is that when I'm working in Excel and I'm working with this payment function, it displays as a negative value. That's why it's in red in parentheses, because Excel thinks of payments as money going out. But for the way that our minds kind of work, it's easier for us to see just the total amount, not in a negative way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up to my formula bar. I'm still working, I have D10 selected still. And in between the equal sign and the P, I'm going to type a minus sign and hit enter. And all that did is it just made, it took the whatever Excel displayed, it made that a negative value. Since it was a negative already, negative times a negative is a positive. So that's why I put a negative value there. So now that I've got my function with all of these fancy absolute and mixed references, now I can copy it over using autofill. So I just hover over the cell that I'm working in. I hover over the little black box on the right bottom until my cursor changes from this huge cross to this tiny little crosshair. I click and I hold down and I drag over all the way to 35, and my function updates, or it copies over, and it follows my rules that I put in for my absolute and mixed references. Since I copied it all the way over, now I need to copy it down. Now I have D10 and all the way to H10 selected, but I only have one little box at the bottom right. So I'm going to hover my mouse over that till my cursor changes, and I'm going to drag down all the way down to H20. And it fills in my function, or my payment function, for every single cell. So if I click here, let's say 25-year mortgage at $280,000, I know it's right. I can double click on it and see what's going on. For my interest rate, I've got E5 divided by E6. That's what I want. Remember, that's not going to change. And that's where absolute references, they kept it the same for us. And my number of periods, I've got F9. So F9 is 25 years times E6. 12 payments per year. Perfect. And then for my present value, the amount of the mortgage right now, I've got C13. Since I'm working in this row here, 13, it automatically updates to $280,000. So using those absolute and mixed references is absolutely essential when I'm working with this kind of a function. So I hit enter, or I could have hit escape to get out of that. And now I've got this beautiful chart that shows me what my different mortgage payments would be based on a different amount of years and different amount of original mortgage amounts. So I hope that you found this helpful.